Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2018 Harmony webinar series. My name is Gina Thorne, Chief Marketing Officer for Harmony. It's my pleasure today that we will be featuring Mike Lewis, Spiritual Advisor and Detox Counselor for Harmony Foundation. He'll be speaking on the spiritual matrix, an eclectic and modern stage model of psycho-spiritual development. For those of you that are new to Harmony Foundation, we are a residential treatment program nestled on 43 acres in the Rocky Mountains, just outside of Estes Park, Colorado. We are a residential rehab facility that offers comprehensive treatment for adults and their family members. For those of you that are interested in learning more about who Harmony is, we believe that long-term recovery from alcohol and other drugs is possible. How do we do this? We are a place between two worlds. Our location in the Rockies provides a safe and quiet respite from the pain of addiction. With 49 years of treating addiction, we have fostered a generation of long-term recovery who supports our clients and families for a lifetime. Harmony staff at all levels of the organization work together to create a community of recovery support that is long-lasting. We are a 70-bed facility that offers a full continuum of care beginning at detox through residential treatment. Located at the base of Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park, Colorado, we offer an evidence-based 12-step program that is gender responsive. If you or someone you know might need access to treatment, please consider Harmony Foundation. Visit us at harmonyfoundationinc.com or contact our admissions staff at 866-686-7867. If you are looking to receive continuing education for this webinar, please be sure to complete the online evaluation at the end of the webinar. We usually have those go out about an hour after the webinar completes. If you don't see an email for that, please email me or Christy Weeks at cweeks@harmonyfoundationinc.com. Certificates of completion are typically provided by Friday. If you don't receive it by Friday, you can also reach out to me or Christy and we'll take a look. I will clarify for folks that you have to participate in at least 40 minutes of the presentation in order to receive continuing education credits. If you have to jump off early, that's fine. You would be able to still have access to the information. We just wouldn't be able to provide you with a certificate for CEUs. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mike Lewis. Mike Lewis is the Spiritual Advisor and Detox Counselor for Harmony Foundation. He's a graduate of Naropa University with a master's in contemplative counseling psychology. In 2009, Mike was ordained a Buddhist monk and novice priest after 7 years of residential monastic training in Buddhist and Catholic monasteries. In 2017, he finished his ordination training to become a Zen priest. Mike was raised Christian, and beginning in his undergraduate years, he expanded his exploration of the spiritual realm through meditation, yoga, and through decades spent in the wilderness working as an internationally certified mountain guide and outward bound instructor. Though Mike is primarily Buddhist, he incorporates a variety of religious, spiritual, and psychological and scientific approaches to his personal and professional practices. Mike has been guiding and assisting others through personal and spiritual transformation in the wilderness since 1993 and in residential treatment since 2006. This time I'm going to go ahead and transition the presentation over to Mike, and he will take over.
All right, just trying to unmute myself here.
I can hear you really great.
Okay, so you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the Spiritual Matrix, and we'll go ahead and get started. So Gina just gave an introduction about me, but I just want to give a little bit more information. I like for folks to know where I'm coming from so that they have some kind of idea of where all my ideas and my thoughts about what we're talking about come from. So, and this is my spirituality. So primarily my spirituality is Buddhist, and I'm an ordained priest and monk. I also have a master's degree in counseling from Naropa University, and so understanding emotions and psychology is a big part of my spirituality. I also spent most of my professional career working in the outdoors, so being in nature and traveling around the world. And then practicing yoga. I've been doing yoga for a long time. I've also studied the philosophy of yoga, Hinduism, and other Eastern or Indian spiritualities. And then finally, I grew up Lutheran and Methodist. Took a break from Christianity for a while, and then my Buddhist training actually brought me back to understanding Christianity in a whole new way. And I consider myself a contemplative Christian as well as a Buddhist. And I'll talk about what that means more for those who don't know. So here's some objectives for this webinar. To develop a broader understanding of spirituality, what it is, why people seek it out, and the many manifestations it takes. To explore stages of spiritual development and the characteristics that identify and separate those stages. We'll also explore stages of emotional development and how they relate to spiritual development. And then just making the connections between the stages of spiritual development, emotional and social intelligence, and how that fits with human cognition and behavior. I have some disclaimers, and this is a little bit of a making sure nobody gets too upset. Whenever we talk about religion and spirituality, some people can get offended. So I just wanted to say that we're branching into topics that a lot of people tend to avoid. So yeah, just putting that out there. And I am human. I have my own biases that I am aware of, and I'm sure I have some that I'm not aware of, and they may come out. And so I just want to really emphasize that you don't have to believe anything that I say today. Let's see. So this matrix that we're going to go through is something that I've created based on my own personal experience and research, as well as researching other models of spirituality and foundational models of psychology that underlie the modern practice of psychotherapy. And I just want to say it's okay to feel frustrated when I teach this course. Some people have these ecstatic spiritual awakenings, actually, and then other people get really frustrated and are triggered by something because we're talking about religion. And I just want to say that if anyone's feeling anything like that, that for me, it's okay. And that means that we're learning. That means that we're bumping up against something that, some kind of belief that we have that could be true or could be not true and could use some looking at. Stage models in general can sound or feel judgmental. And so folks will tend to try to be looking, oh, where do I fit into this stage model? And so that's a natural part of looking at stage models. And suddenly you might see, oh, I'm only there. Well, this model must be wrong or something like that. So anyway, just watch out for that. And also, when talking about different levels of anything, it can always seem like whatever the lower level is worse, but that's not how I'm coming up about it. I just see wherever people are at is where they're at, and that's just reality. And then finally, stage models are limited, and they do not encompass a human being's complete experience. They're usually two-dimensional linear, which life is not. So they just offer one angle to look at our reality. So this model that we're doing is actually something that I teach once a month to our clients here at Harmony. And the reason is because folks, when they show up struggling with addiction, we are a 12-step based program, which includes seeking out one's higher power and relating to the higher power in some way. So a lot of folks show up spiritually bankrupt, is the phrase often used. So but they also actually show up with some anger about religion and spirituality and some misperceptions. So this particular presentation is something I do to try to open minds a little bit, give some folks some new ways of seeing things. So these are some questions that often people are struggling with when it comes to spirituality. So what is the purpose and meaning of human life? What is the true source of happiness and contentment? Does God even exist? Is there some kind of omniscient creator? Is there an afterlife? Do heaven and hell exist? A common thing that people say is religion is the cause of all the world's problems, and we'll look at that. Which religion is right? If there's all these religions, is one of them right? Are they all wrong? Are they all talking about the same thing? How can people in leadership of the world actually be so cruel sometimes and be seemingly non-compassionate? And these final ones are things that folks say often in my sessions with them. So if there is this God and he loves us so much, why is there so much suffering in the world? And a lot of folks will show up angry at God, and they sort of turned off to God at some point because something went wrong in their life, or something painful happened in their life, and they were angry at God about that. And then finally, we have a lot of folks who say, well, I believe in science. And so all of these questions, to some degree, will be approached today. So I want to start with in terms of questions, there's going to be a time for questions about maybe 2/3 of the way, and then at the end. So multiple intelligences. So Howard Gardner offered this idea back in 1983. And so these are some of his ideas. And we're not going to get into this too deeply, but I just wanted to give some background into the next slide, which are the intelligences that I use. So spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, social, communal, physical and athletic intelligence, artistic, vocational, intellectual, academic, and pragmatic. And so every human being is at different stages of development with each of these intelligences, and we're all born with different capacities to develop at different speeds with these. So, for example, one person might be very academically gifted. They know how to do school. They know how to turn things in on time. They know how to study for tests and all that kind of stuff. They might not actually be that smart, but they just might be academically gifted, where someone might be intellectually gifted, but then not academically gifted and not do well in school. They might be a genius of some kind, like Einstein, but then do poorly in school because they just don't know how to show up in the way that school requires us to. So anyway, I bring this up because I focus on the top two in most of my teachings here at Harmony, which are spiritual and emotional intelligence. And it just gives a background into realizing that, yes, there are actually levels of spiritual intelligence. There are levels of emotional intelligence, and human beings on this planet fit anywhere along the spectrum of being, anywhere from, using that phrase again, spiritually bankrupt to spiritually enlightened, or emotionally unaware to very emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent. So we're going to touch on both of these, mostly focusing on the spiritual, but bringing in the emotional as well. So some definitions of spirituality, just to create a foundation for where we're moving. So this is from Psychology Today. Spirituality means something different to everyone. For some, it's about participating in organized religion, going to a church, synagogue, mosque, and so on. For others, spirituality is a non-religious experience that varies from person to person. Some people get in touch with their spiritual side through private prayer, yoga, meditation, quiet reflection, a belief in the supernatural, or long walks. And here's the definition that I'm putting out there. That spirituality is any activity, belief, or experience that helps a person connect more deeply with themselves, their community, their environment, and or to something greater than themselves. And this is important because a lot of folks show up and I ask what the definition of spirituality is, and some people will say basically religion. And I think there's a growing understanding that spirituality and religion are not necessarily the same thing, though they can overlap, but not always. And you can be spiritual and not religious but not spiritual, maybe. That's kind of tricky. And then you can obviously be both. All right, so we're going to get into some big topics here. So, and this looking at reality is actually looking at another way to define spirituality. So, in the Buddhist training and across different forms of spirituality, there's this sense of an absolute reality and a relative reality. An absolute reality is this reality. Well, I'll just read what it says here. Ultimate reality is in itself unaffected by the perception or knowledge of any finite being. Relative reality is the experience in the world of matter that is purely relative. So all truths are in context, thus being relative truths. So another way of saying this, absolute reality is this reality that exists all the time. It is beyond religion, beyond human perception. It's this thing that's always unfolding in any given moment, whether human beings are on this planet, in this universe or not. And then relative reality is our individual versions of reality. So, a question that I always ask is, how many different relative realities are there? And people say various numbers, and then my answer is there's a different relative reality per human being on this planet. So every human being has been influenced by cultural, familial, genetic, and spiritual influences in their life, and that is going to give them a different set of goggles that they're looking through to to understand the world that they live in. Now, this scale on the left, with the relative at the bottom, the absolute at the top, so that line in the middle, in the spiritual traditions, another way of understanding spirituality is that spirituality is this process of developing your understanding so that your understanding is more clear and more closer to the absolute reality. And so there's a set of, changing beliefs over time, maturing beliefs, and through practice, developing an experiential understanding of that absolute experience beyond our thoughts. So, when anybody talks about having a spiritual experience or having some moment in life that really stood out, usually in those moments, their thoughts have faded away and their senses have become alive, and they're really directly experiencing life without all their judgments, without all their preconceptions, just a pure experience. And so I put that line there in the middle, the red line in there in the middle. I don't know if you can see my arrow or not, but this red line in the middle is, I don't know, I'm just putting that out there that maybe that's as far as any human being can really see. Maybe the Buddha, Jesus, Zoroaster, Krishna, certain people like that have been to there. Maybe they can see the absolute reality. I don't know because I'm not there. But there is this ability to have a perception of absolute reality that's more than what we're necessarily born with. So one more thought on this is that in terms of suffering, from the Buddhist perspective, the further one's relative perspective is from the absolute perspective, the more that person will suffer. So the less clear they see things and experience things, the more they will suffer. So hence the spiritual path. So a question that I put out to all of you listening is, what are the different ways that people find spirituality? And I'm going to be putting some stuff up here in a moment. But usually people come up with Christianity as one of the first ones because largely we're a Christian country as far as the highest number of folks that practice a given religion in this country. Some people come up with Buddhism. That's another popular one that's showing up in the U.S. right now. Judaism. Eventually, some folks will come up with nature, but then people get stuck a little bit. So I'm going to show some here. And at the bottom, I've added another scale here that's going to give some context to some of these groups here. So here's one group on the far left here. So these are the monotheists, so they believe in one God. Zoroastrianism is the second oldest religion in the world. It comes from Iran and is still very popular. And then under that, you have the Abrahamic Religions. So these are the religions that come out of Judaism. So Christianity comes out of Judaism, Islam, the Latter-day Saints comes out of Christianity, Rastafarianism I think comes out of Judaism, but it might come out of Christianity, I can't remember. And then if you look at the bottom, in Christianity there are three different forms of Christianity. So you have the Contemplatives, the Orthodox, and the Protestant, and they came into being in that order. So originally, before Christianity was Christianity, it was just called the Way. And there were the Contemplatives, the people who prayed, the people who meditated, the people who walked in the desert forefathers, and all of these people. And then came the Orthodox, so the Catholics, the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox. And then out of the Orthodox came the Protestant groups, like the Lutherans, the Baptists, the Methodists, Presbyterians, and so on. And then the Latter-day Saints came, and you could call them a Protestant group, and they consider themselves Christians. But anyway, so this is one set of folks that seek spirituality. So this is another group, and I kind of lump all these in the polytheists. Hindus actually do believe in sort of one overarching God, or actually the true self. But they also have, depending on who you talk to, 330,000 gods, or even over 3 million different gods. And so basically a God that represents every different aspect of the human nature and beyond the human nature. So the stars, the earth, the sky, the land. In shamanism, you have the Native Americans, you have South American shaman groups, the Aborigines from Australia, New Zealand. There's shaman groups, shamanistic groups that have existed for thousands of years and are across the world. Oh, and then stepping back to Hinduism. So Hinduism is the oldest religion in the world. Some people say back to 10,000 years or more is where its roots came from. And you have the pagans, the Wiccans, the Greek mythology. And then here we still have religions. So these are all still religions, depending on how you define religion. But you have yoga, Buddhism, Jainism, Taoism. And so these are non-theistic, but still religious groups. They believe in Buddha nature, the higher self, the true self. So people also seek spirituality through science. So when people become interested in astronomy or biology, often people are trying to understand the world they live in and understand and connect to something greater than who they are. So science can be a form of spirituality. Philosophy, psychology, understanding ourselves, understanding each other, self-help, New Age mysticism, recovery, so AA, NA, smart recovery, refuge recovery. Recovery groups are a form of spirituality. You could even call it religion, depending on your definition. Scientology. I don't know much about Scientology, but that's where that one seems to get lumped into. And then here we have I call these the intuitive, so sort of non-structured forms of spirituality, though politics, athletics, all these things can be spiritual, but they're not or can be structured, but they're not necessarily focused in the direction of spirituality, though they can and often are spiritual for people. So nature, environmentalism, politics, athletics, family and community-oriented activities, and then drugs, which usually I tell our clients this might not be a great path for you, given why you're here. But a lot of people do use peyote, ayahuasca, LSD to try to experience something greater than their finite experience. Okay. So, and then you'll see at the bottom I have monotheism, polytheism, agnosticism, atheism. Now, a lot of people will not fit into one category. Like I said, I'm Buddhist, Christian, a yogi, I'm into psychology, self-help, and I also have spent a lot of time in nature. So those 5 things make up my spirituality. But you'll see why these different groups are lumped in the way they are in just a moment. So, all these people, all these millions of people on the planet, what do they all want? This is a question that I ask in the group. So, what does everybody want? Whether you're Hindu, a Scientologist, a politician, Rastafarian, what does everybody want? So this is going to come back to this, love and inner peace. And really, inner peace, love is this thing that we talk about, but, is an athlete seeking inner love, when they run? Maybe you could say that, wanting to love themselves, love their own body, feel that joy that comes from inside. So you could throw joy up there. But ultimately, every human being on this planet, no matter what they're doing, they're seeking some kind of peace. Whatever they're doing gives them a sense of relief or relaxation, or it ends whatever they're doing in some degree of stress for them. So when we look at each group has different names for it. So over in the intuitive group, just kind of your average human being, if you ask someone on the street, oh, what do you want out of life? People would say happiness. And then they look a little deeper. Oh, maybe not just the pleasureful experience of happiness. Maybe I want contentment or satisfaction. Joy, I want to live my dream. Freedom is this word that comes up a lot. I want to reach my potential. World peace, communal peace. And then these groups over here, so the Hindus, the shamans, the yogis, the Buddhists, they might use words like this: enlightenment, nirvana, true nature, Buddhahood, realization, end of suffering. Again, these are all just different forms of peace, love, same kind of joyful, light feelings inside. This group, those who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so you have self-actualization as the highest part of that model. And then self-realization, true self, truth, the light. And then coming over to this group, so and specifically the Christians and Jewish folks, Muslims might use some of these words, and so on. So union with the divine, I want to be delivered. I'm looking for heaven, everlasting salvation, or just salvation, or I want to be saved. I want to be with my Creator, things like that, which, when you look at all of those words, the feeling inside is often this sense of peace, sense of the stress, the anxiety is gone. So one reason I bring this up when I teach this group is because we can get so involved in this idea that Christians are like this and Buddhists are like that and psychiatrists want that and people who go rock climbing want that. But inside every human action, every moment of every life, any human being is seeking a certain internal feeling. Whether we seek out a certain food, whether we want to have a conversation with a certain person, what kind of job we want, what car we want, what TV show I want to watch. whether I want a hot shower, this kind of perfume, or that kind of cologne. Everybody's seeking these internal experiences, and everybody wants pleasure and to avoid pain for the most part. So there's this connecting aspect of all human beings wanting the same thing that washes away all these different names of how we label ourselves. So now we get into the stages. So the stages of development of spiritual development can look a lot of different ways, and I'm going to go over some other models soon after we go through this. But we'll look at these. So we have dualism, integration, and unity. And so these are my creations, coming from different things that I've experienced in other models I've studied. So let's look at dualism first. So in duality, the mind and body are separate. The body is the source of sin and evil. And at this level, at this state of being, people are very much in their heads. So the mind is just spinning with thoughts, and people often identify with their thoughts at this level of being. Now, naturally, human minds, that's what they do. The brain secretes thoughts just like the belly secretes enzymes. But what happens is people, just because of our human development, where we are in our evolution at this point in time, our minds naturally do this. Our minds naturally shut off the body because that's where pain happens. And we identify with the thinking component of our brain because there's lots of interesting stuff going on there. As a kid, there's all kinds of interesting thoughts going on. But as we get older, we see how much our thoughts actually create pain and suffering for us, or our inability to manage those thoughts, you could say. So anyway, back to duality. Another aspect of duality is this is the basic animalistic self, seeks pleasure and avoids pain. This is a belief-based level of spiritual development. So this is where beliefs are paramount. There's very little awareness of what is the internal experience and how that experience relates to our external world. And this can be very concrete level of existence, so very black and white. So we'll come to that right now. So this is the realm of good and bad, right and wrong, heaven and hell, mine and yours, life and death, dark and light. And these are always opposites. You're either good or you're bad. Something or somebody is good or bad. And right and wrong come from the outside. So whether you're a politician or an average citizen or a religious person of some kind, you look to your morals from the outside. What are other people telling you to do? What's the Bible telling you to do? What are the Buddhist precepts telling you to do? And then trying to force your body to follow those rules. And whenever your body doesn't follow those rules, then you end up in hell, or you're sinning, or doing something like that. And there is truth to all of this on some level, but at this level of duality, it's a very black and white kind of way of seeing things. This can also be a fear-based version of spirituality. So fear of what happens in the afterlife, fear of not getting to heaven, fear of, and when I say that heaven, not getting to heaven, that's not just a Christian ideal. So there's also the Pure Land Buddhists. There's also the fear of a negative reincarnation, in Hinduism, things like that. So there's a lot of fear involved, and wanting to follow what God is telling us out of fear. And so in this realm, there's a need to be right and everyone else is wrong, because if my beliefs are so there's my beliefs and then there's other people's beliefs that look different from my beliefs. So if my beliefs are the right ones, then theirs can't be right because they're different. And so theirs have to be wrong so that mine are right, so that I'm not as scared, because I if I think I'm following the right path, then that's going to make me feel more inner peace because the fear is gone. So that's why there has to be a right and wrong, and mine is the right way, yours is the wrong way. In this realm, there's also hedonism, guilt-based charity. So this is doing for others, with this external appearance of being this really giving person, but actually underneath there's guilt that's driving that giving. Not always, but it can be. And then at this level, God is anthropomorphic and very far away. So an anthropomorphic God is a God that looks like me. So if I'm white, then God is white. If I'm male, God is male. And there's a place that this God lives that looks like me somewhere. And so a Christian friend of mine who I respect very much recently told me about this idea of third grade theology, which is a theory within Christianity, or at least within certain people in Christianity. And the example is that, people go to church, and this could be Buddhist groups, any group around the world, or even politicians or anybody. And you learn what your God is, you learn about your idea of spirituality or reality, but then the learning stops at that point, because then you become interested in social stuff, and then sports, and then having a job and having a family, and before you know it, you're 45 years old and you still believe that God is a white guy with a beard living on a cloud somewhere up in the sky. And so this is where someone's spirituality can become stunted, even though vocationally, educationally, academically, they have developed very far as a human being, but they haven't brought their spirituality along with them. They left it back when they were a kid. So some recent research that I read was by David Hawkins, and he said that 78% of humanity around the world is actually living in this lower stage of spirituality, which doesn't mean that they're not smart or holding a job or doing whatever, but that's just that their spirituality hasn't continued development from when they were a kid, or they might be living in a dualistic realm of this and that, right and wrong, and so on. And also kind of a mentality of hedonism, of just, buying stuff for me, consumerism, materialism, buying stuff for me so I can be happy in this life because this is it, so I might as well be happy while I'm here. And that doesn't extend out to their caring about the environment, caring about other people around the world, and so on. So let's move on to the next stage of integration. So this is the realm of the good person. And at the bottom here, there's a shift from belief-based spirituality to behavior-oriented spirituality. So instead of criticizing everyone outside of you, you start to look at yourself, not necessarily criticizing, but just kind of looking at how you are in the world, or how I am in the world. And just caring about the effect that we have on other people in our environment. This is the realm of the conscious self, becoming more and more self-aware, caring less about what others are doing and more about how one is manifesting. So basically what I just said. Compassion-based charity. So you start to feel that connection to all people, not just people in your family or in your small community, but you start to feel that compassion expanding out to any human being, realizing that we all suffer and that we all want happiness. This is where people will become more challenge-oriented. So they want to be better people. I want to be a better person. It's not just about having fun and having pleasure. It's actually wanting to look at oneself and be better. So this is an example of where athleticism can come in. So athletes are very focused a lot on being the best athlete they can be and doing whatever it takes to be the best athlete they can be. So training, eating well, all this kind of stuff. So athletes can actually progress to a certain degree in spirituality without actually having any kind of other spiritual focus. This is the realm of becoming aware of one's karma, sin, the cause and effect, and the consequences of one's actions, thoughts, and feelings. So karma and sin are actually very similar and point to the same thing, the true meaning of sin. And the true meaning of sin is actually, it's an internal feeling of, am I aligning myself with what God wants right now? Or am I following my ego and what my body seeks for pleasure? So, and pleasure is not always a bad thing or an unhealthy thing. It can be that is the direction that our internal voice of God wants us to go. But karma is the same thing. So in karma, any moment that we're in alignment with our true nature, our internal knowing of what is right or best or healthy or compassionate, then we are developing positive karma for ourselves. If we are avoiding that feeling or ignoring that feeling and going with our self-centered or sensual, momentary pleasures, then we are creating negative karma for ourselves. And the pleasure thing is tricky, but anyway, there's more to that, but that's kind of a general situation. So karma also points to cause and effect. So, and the sin is the same thing. So if I'm aligned with my heart and I'm following my heart and I do what is nice for other people and I do what is kind and I treat my body well and I take time out of every day to be quiet and sink in and give myself, my body, my nervous system a chance to relax, then I'm going to feel better. So there's a cause and an effect. If I feel better, I'm going to have better relationships with other people. People are going to like me more. I'm going to get better jobs, so on and so forth. So there's a cause and effect that goes along with following our heart. If we don't follow our heart, then it goes in the opposite direction. So at this realm, God is everywhere. God is within me. So in the Bible, Luke 17:21, the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God is within. In Buddhism, the true nature is our true nature. We are born with it. So it's actually the opposite of original sin. It's original goodness. But there's still a dualistic component here. So God is everywhere. So there's a God and there is this place that God can be. There is a God and there's also me that is in me. So there's still an aspect of dualism that exists at this realm. At this realm, there's an ability to delay gratification for a higher purpose. So going back to Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, that era when they talked about the delay of gratification and the meaning and the spiritual purpose of that. Which an example of that is simply just sitting down to pray for 20 minutes a day or meditate for 20 minutes a day, or putting off your own desires because someone is in need and helping them in that moment. So that's an example of that. And then finally for this section, there's a sense of purpose and meaning in one's life that is bigger than just seeking pleasures, bigger than just what's the biggest house and car and all this stuff that I can get, which you can have all that stuff as a spiritual being, as a highly evolved spiritual being. But if that is the ultimate goal, then that's an example of that false god that Christians talk about, the false idol. Okay. And finally, let's get to unity. So this realm of oneness. This is the dissolution of the ego, the realm of the mystic, the contemplative, the spiritual activist. So very few people exist in this realm. These are the very special people through history and common era. So we have, in the past, obviously the Buddha, Jesus, people like that. But we also had Meister Eckhart, Teresa of Avila, the many Zen masters, the yogis, but also many lay people as well. There are many householders with families and children who devote their lives to the spiritual path, to spiritual transformation, and then everything in their life becomes the path of spirituality. So taking their kids to soccer practice is a path of spirituality. Chopping vegetables, taking the garbage out, taking time out for meditation each day. This is the path of spirituality, even for the householder. So basically, to go into this realm, daily prayer and meditation and study are absolutes and necessary. And it can look different ways. Some people walk for hours, every week, and that is their quiet time. Maybe someone like John Muir was able to branch into this realm through hiking and being in nature. But typically this realm is going to be for folks who have a daily meditation and prayer practice. Here, let's see, the mind is at peace, the heart is open. The higher self, so this is the realm of the higher self, functioning from an embodied union of mind, body, and spirit. So the mind and the body have come back together, and the spirit is now running the show. Versus in dualism, the body is running the show mostly, chasing pleasures. In the realm of integration, now the mind is running the show, and the consciousness and the conscious ability to override the sensual pleasures for a higher goal of career or whatever, or charity, giving, service to others. But in the spiritual, in the realm of union, the spirit now is running the show. And so you could say that it's the Holy Spirit, it's the God within, the true nature, the great mystery that comes through and is the source of all of us. So God is God. At the entrance to this level, God is now God. It's not everywhere. It's not in me. Everything is just God. Everything is God, including the highlighter, TV, me, you, everything, everybody. But then eventually that even drops away because that's still an idea. So you come into the non-conceptual realm of pure and direct experience of what is. And then finally at the bottom, one's identity is malleable and unfixed. So that means, we all have identities in the world, and someone could be a monk, or they could be a teacher, or a counselor, or a therapist, or an alcoholic, or however someone identifies themselves. And those identities are more rigid the further down the spiritual in the levels that someone is, and the further someone progresses spiritually, the more those identities are just little coats that people wear when they need them, and then they can be shed whenever needed. Okay. So, states and stages. On the spiritual path, we all start somewhere. So maybe someone starts, like I've got this graph here, maybe someone starts midway in the dualistic realm. Maybe someone starts out in the integration realm, depending on their karmic consequences that brought them into this life, who their parents were, their genetics, whatever. But people have an opportunity to develop spiritually. So, just from going to church or learning more about psychology or getting out in nature, someone can get in touch with something greater. They can get in touch with that inner peace, and then they might crave it. They might want it more, so then they start meditating more or going out in nature more or committing themselves to higher goals and delaying gratification for that purpose. And then they might have these heightened experiences, the burning bush moments, the spiritual awakenings, the moments of realization. And then after those realizations, people will come back down, but they'll be at a new stage. And so they'll be functioning in the world from a different stage of being. And then they might have another state experience that takes them, and they have this heightened experience. And then they come back down and they're at a new stage. And this can go on and on depending on how much someone devotes themselves to their spiritual path. Now, people are drawn to different leaders or teachers depending on where they are. So here I've got 4 ovals. And if you look at the one on the right, we'll go over to that science philosophy line. The person in the bottom can only see so far ahead, and anything beyond that seems wild and crazy. So they seek a teacher that's further up, further beyond where they are, but not too far. And they will stay with that teacher maybe for their whole life, or maybe they will surpass that teacher and then seek a teacher or a mentor that's even further along. So an example of that is, in churches, and I lived in South Korea for a while, and I saw this in the Buddhist temples there, is that, in this realm of dualism, you can have a Christian group, you can have a Buddhist group, you can have a Hindu group, you can have a psychologist who are functioning from the realm of duality, and who are very much like, mine is the way, mine is the only right way, yours is the wrong way. You can even see that among Christian groups. Lutherans might say, well, Lutheran is the right way, and the Methodists might say, well, the Methodists are the right way. But it's not all the Methodists that will say that. It's not all the Lutherans that will say that. It's just the people who are spiritually in that realm of dualism. You can also find Methodists who are in the realm of integration who will say, oh, all paths, if it works for you, great. And in the realm of unity, a Methodist there, hey, we are all doing the same thing. Everybody wants love. Everybody wants peace. Let's love each other. Is your path working for you? Great. So that's examples of how different people might think along the realm of dualism, integration, and unity. So that's why people sometimes will be confused when they see, Christians fighting against environmentalists, and environmentalists fighting against Christians. And when I was a mountain guide, I had a psychologist client from Salt Lake City, and he's a brilliant human being. But spiritually, he was in the realm of dualism. So he was very intellectually gifted, but spiritually not. And so for him, all religion was bad and was the cause of all the world's problems. But in that, he was separating. He was creating separation. So dualism is this realm of separating oneself from others, feeling superior, feeling better than. So it's a realm of arrogance, at times can be. So let's move on here. So we have only a few minutes left. There's a few more things I wanted to get to, and then I'll open up to a few final questions. So here's 2 other stage theories on spiritual development. On the left one, stages in spiritual growth, you can see intellectual is the very bottom, and then belief, and then spiritual practice begins, and then you have those state experiences where you have a spiritual experience, and that develops your faith in the practice, and then that develops this joy of your spirituality, which moves into the devotion to the practice, to your God, to your teacher, to your own true nature, and eventually to self-realization. And these are cycles. The whole thing goes in cycles. There's different levels of self-realization. Same thing is true over here in Fowler's stage theory of religious development. So again, if you look at stage 1, it's very fantasy-oriented, good and evil. As you move up the stages, there's more logical process involved in what God is and who God is. And then as you move into stage 4, 5, and 6, then it becomes more experiential. And if you look at stage 6 in Fowler's stage theory, you're transcending belief systems to achieve a sense of oneness with all being. And then ideally that, whether you're living at stage 6 or you have a state experience of stage 6, but then maybe you come back and you're living at stage 4 or stage 3, hopefully that experience of that oneness infuses into how you function in the world, and you start to care more about how everything is actually interconnected, which science is proving over and over again these days, and the mystics have been talking about for thousands of years. Everything is actually connected and interdependent. So bringing in the emotional, the psychological component. So many folks are, especially if you're a counselor or therapist, you'd be familiar with Kohlberg's stages of moral development and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Whether you are or not, basically, in both of these are the same, similar stage models as to what I've presented. And looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in the bottom, you're focused on you. Where's my water? Where's my food? Where's my pleasure? Where's my stability? Where's what I want? Where's what I need? And then you move further and you get up into developing connection with others. In self-esteem, you're delaying gratification for higher goals. And then in self-actualization, there's a very profound sense of acceptance of what is, but then moving in the world in a creative way to serve others who need it. Another stage of psychological development, we won't go through this, but it's very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then coming to some emotional development. So on the right, you have Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. And in the beginning, basically, like if you look at the toddler, if the toddler is developing healthily, they're going to have autonomy. If they don't, they're going to have shame and doubt about themselves. And then they move on. And if they're healthily developing, they're going to develop initiative. If they don't, they're going to develop guilt. And so the more someone falls into the bottom of that set of things, basic mistrust, shame and doubt, guilt, inferiority, the less they're going to be spiritually able to move forward, because they're going to have what are called developmental traumas, which are going to hold them back. And so I'll move on to this one. So the blue line here is an example of someone who has not moved forward emotionally but has had spiritual experiences. So they're basically staying at the same stage of development with these heightened spiritual experiences, and they think they're spiritually evolved, but they come right back down, and it's that old shame, that old guilt, the repressed anger, resentments, fear, powerlessness, hurt, all of that stuff buried in the body that they're not attending to, that keeps them from developing spiritually. So the green line, says the spiritual path should include, or else should's a tricky word, a healthy spiritual path that actually moves forward is going to also include emotional development, and is going to include developing emotional intelligence along the way. So just another slide here too, and then we're done. So spiritual bypassing. This is the use of spiritual ideas and practices to avoid dealing with painful feelings, unresolved wounds, and developmental needs. So in that realm of duality, people will hold on to their beliefs really hard and never really look at their emotional stuff that's driving it underneath. So that fear, the guilt, the shame, the old wounds, the abuse from childhood, whatever it was. And so they won't move very far spiritually and stay in that realm of duality. So as a spiritual practitioner, we've got to look at our emotional development as well. So I believe, one of my last ones here. So these are just different versions of spiritual practice that people do. Anywhere from the casual, walking on the beach, picking up seashells, to the completely devoted, where you've picked a path and you're really practicing every day and you've made your life about spirituality. And so every human being is going to fall somewhere in there, because everybody's spiritual on some level. So these are some takeaway points. and you'll take away whatever you want. And I just about out of time. Gina, are there any questions that folks have asked already, or should I even open it up to this point for questions, or is it too late?
We do have time for one question. Cindy Rosa asked, how do we assist someone to recognize a higher experience in their spirituality? Sometimes it seems impossible to have them see anything differently other than their dualistic viewpoint.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's kind of like I was saying, people can only see a little bit further from where they are. And I think it's an unfortunate reality that anytime we try to force people into seeing something that we think they should see, it's usually going to get pushback. And it always comes back to, if we are the models of love, acceptance, appreciation, gratitude, forgiveness, then when the person is ready for it, they know where to go. And one thought just came to mind too was it often takes a difficult experience in one's life to have to want to see something further. And so at Harmony or in any kind of addiction treatment center, people are often at a rock bottom because they've lost a lot at this point, and they're scared about their health and what they've lost in their life, and they're ready. They're ready to see something new and different. And so I think all we can do is plant seeds with kindness and allow those seeds to mature or not.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much. That was the last question we had, and I know that we're a little over time. Thank you, Mike, so much for your time today. It was a wonderful workshop. For those of you that are interested in a recorded version of this, we will have that available. Feel free to email me if you'd like additional information. Next month's workshop is on intergenerational trauma and constellation work with Karen Drimmel on December 19th. Be looking for the email that will be coming out about that next week. Many thanks again, Mike, for your time. And for those of you that are seeking CEU credits, the certificates will be available on Friday. Thanks so much.